It has long been observed that all else being equal, smaller athletes are stronger pound for pound than larger athletes. The reason for this is that a muscle's maximal contractile force is fairly proportional to the cross-sectional area, which is related to the square of linear body dimensions, where a muscle's mass is proportional to its volume, which is related to the cube of the linear body dimensions. Therefore, a body size increases. Body mass increases more rapidly than does muscle strength. Given constant body proportions, the smaller athlete has a higher strength-to-mass ratio than does the larger athlete. There has always been interest in comparing the performance of lifters in different weight categories. The most obvious method for doing so is to divide the weight lifted by the athlete's body weight. However, such an adjustment is biased against larger athletes because it does not take into account the expected drop in the muscle strength-to-mass ratio with increasing body size. Various formulas have been derived to compare lifts more equitably. In the classic formula, the lift is divided by body weight to the 2/3 power, thus accounting for the relationship of cross-sectional area versus volume. Other formulas have been developed because the classic formula seemed to favor athletes of middle body weight over lighter or heavier athletes. However, the classic formula determination that performance of medium weight lifters are usually the best may indeed be unbiased, because the bell-shaped curve describing the normal distribution of anthropometric characteristics among the population, the body weights of a majority of people are clustered close to the mean. One would expect the weight category with the largest number of competitors to produce the best performers. Sources of resistance to muscle contraction. The most common sources to resistance from strength training exercises are gravity, inertia, friction, fluid resistance, and elasticity. This section provides information on the force and power required to overcome these forms of resistance. An understanding of the principle behind exercise devices using the various forms of resistance can provide insight into the effectiveness and applicability. Gravity. The downward force of an object from the pull of gravity, otherwise called the object's weight, is equal to the object's mass times the local acceleration due to gravity, where Fg is the force due to gravity, same as the object's weight. M is the object's mass, and Ag is the local acceleration due to gravity. As discussed earlier, the acceleration due to gravity can vary by geographic location. Weighing a barbell on a calibrated spring or electronic scale shows its actual weight. A balance scale determines only the object's mass, so its weight must be calculated using the equation if a spring or electronic scale is not available. Popular terminology for weight and mass is often incorrect. For example, some barbells and stack machine plates are labeled in pounds. The pound is a unit of force, not mass. In actuality, only the mass of a barbell plate stays constant, while the weight varies according to the local acceleration due to gravity. The kilogram designated on a weight plate refers to its mass. It is not correct to say that an object weighs a certain number of kilograms, since the weight refers to force, not mass. Instead, one should say the mass of the barbell is 85 kilograms. Applications to resistance training. The gravitational force on an object always acts downwards, since by definition the moment arm by which the force produced torque is perpendicular to the line of action of the force. The moment arm of a weight is always horizontal. Thus, torque due to an object's weight is the product of the weight and the horizontal distance from the weight to the pivotal point joint. During a lift, although the weight does not change, its horizontal distance from a given joint axis changes constantly. When the weight is horizontal closest to the joint, it exerts less resistive torque, but when it is horizontal furthest from the joint, it exerts more resistive torque. For example, in an arm curl, the horizontal distance from the elbow to the barbell is greatest when the forearm is horizontal. Thus, in that position, the lifter must exert the greatest muscle torque to support the weight. The moment arm decreases as the forearm rotates either upward or downward away from the horizontal, decreasing the resistive torque arising from the weight. When the weight is directly above or below the elbow pivotal point, there is no resistive torque from the weight. Lifting technique can affect the resistive torque pattern during a lift and shift stress among muscles groups. For the squat, for example, a more forward inclination of the trunk brings the weight horizontal closer to the knees, thus reducing the resistive torque about the knees that the quadriceps must counteract. At the same time, the weight is horizontal further from the hip, increasing the resistive torque about the hip that the glutes and the hamstrings must counteract. When the barbell is positioned as low as possible on the upper back in order not to fall, the lifter must incline the trunk relatively far forward to keep the center of mass of body plus the bar over his feet. Because the bar is then horizontal far from the hip and close to the knee, stress is focused on the hip extensors and to a lesser extent on the knee extensors. A competitive lifter may wish to adjust his or her lifting technique to shift resistance from muscles that are relatively weak to those that are relatively strong. Although general lifting principles apply to everyone, the details of optimal lifting technique can vary among individuals. A lifter can experiment with the specifics of competitive lift technique to utilize his or her individual strength. The variety of body positions observed among competitive deadlifters, for example, illustrates this principle. In an exercise program, lifting technique can be manipulated to reduce stress on an injured area. For example, particular squatting technique using a Smith machine can greatly reduce stress on the injured back. The great advantage of the Smith machine is that the lifter will not fall down even when the center of mass of the body plus the bar is not over the feet. Thus, to minimize back stress during the squat with the Smith machine, the lifter's feet are positioned a foot or more forward than that of the usual position in relation to the barbell. The trunk then does not incline forward during the squat movement, and torque on the lower back is greatly reduced. Because of the line of action of the weight is horizontal far from the knees, the quadriceps do most of the lifting work. The front squat exhibits a similar but less pronounced effect. Weight stack machines. As with free weights, gravity is the source of resistance training for weight stack machines. However, means of pulleys, cams, cables, and gears, these machines provide increased control over the direction of the pattern of resistance. Both free weights and stack machines have advantages and disadvantages. Following are some advantages of the stack machine. Safety. The likelihood of injury as a result of being hit by, tripping over, or being trapped under a weight is reduced. It requires less skill to maintain control of a weight stack than of a free weight. Design flexibility. Machines can be designed to provide resistance to body movements that are difficult to resist with free weights. Hip adduction, abduction, hip flexor. To some extent, the pattern of resistance can be engineered into a machine. Ease of use. Many people who fear they lack coordination or technique to lift free weights safely feel confident when using machines. Also, it is quicker and easier to select a weight by inserting a pin in a stack than mounting plates on a bar. Advantages of free weights. For example, whole body training. Free weight exercises are often performed in the standing position with the weight supported by the entire body, taxing a larger portion of the body's musculature than a weight stack machine would. Such weight-bearing exercising promotes bone mineralization, helping to prevent osteoporosis in later life. Moreover, the movement of a free weight is constrained by the lifter rather than the machine, requiring muscles to work in stabilization as well as support. Structural lifts, such as cleans and snatches, are particularly useful when providing training stimulus for a major portion of the body's musculature. Simulation of real-life activities. The lifting and acceleration of objects represented a major part in sports and other physical demanding activities. Machines tend to isolate single muscle groups. The lifting of free weights involves the more natural coordination of several muscle groups. Nautilus Sports Medical Industries popularized the concept of tailoring resistance torque through the range of motion by creating an exercise machine that uses a cam of variable radius that changes the length of the moment arm through which the weight stack acts. The rationale was to provide more resistance at points in the range of motion where the muscles would exert greater torque and less resistance where the muscles would apply less torque. For the system to work as planned, however, the lifter must move at a constant, slow angular velocity, which is difficult to do consistently. Also, currently, cam-based machines frequently fail to match normal human torque capability patterns. inertia. In addition to gravitational force, a barbell or weight stack, when accelerated, exerts inertial force on the lifter. Though the force of gravity acts only downward, inertial force can act in any direction. The upward force of a lifter exerts equal the weight lifted plus any inertial force, which is the mass times the upward acceleration of the bar. Horizontal bar acceleration occurs if the lifter exerts net force on the bar directed to the front, back, left, or right. Deceleration, also called negative acceleration, is the slowing down of a weight and requires net force in the direction opposite than that in which the weight is moving. For a weight moving upward, the lifter can reduce upward force on the bar and let the force of gravity decelerate the weight. If the weight is moving horizontally at the top of a standing bicep curl, the lifter must exert force in the direction opposite that in which the weight is moving to decelerate it. If the weight is moving downward, as when lowering the weight, the lifter must exert upward force greater than that of the weight to decelerate it. All lifts involve some acceleration at the beginning to bring the bar from a zero to an upward velocity, and some deceleration near the top of the lift to bring the bar's velocity back to zero. With this acceleration pattern, the agonist muscles receive resistance in excess of the bar weight early in the range of motion, but resistance less than the bar weight towards the end of the range of motion. The lifter decelerates the bar by either reducing upward force on the bar or less than the bar weight to let some of all the bar's weight decelerate it, or pushing downward against the bar using antagonist muscles. In either case, deceleration has the effect in providing less resistance to the agonist muscles late in the range of motion. Compared with a slow lift with minimal acceleration at a given weight, a lifter involving high acceleration, an explosive lift, provides greater resistance to the muscles involved early in the lift and less resistance to the muscles involved towards the end of the lift. However, heavier weights can be handled in accelerative lifts than in slow lifts, allowing near maximal resistance to be attained for all muscles involved in the lift. During a power clean of a heavy weight, for example, the strong leg, hip, back muscles accelerate the bar vertically to a high enough velocity that even though the weaker upper body muscles cannot exert vertical force equal to the bar's weight, the bar continues to travel upward until the force of gravity decelerates the bar to zero velocity at the top of the lift. Although acceleration changes the nature of an exercise and makes resistance patterns less predictable, accelerating and lifting is not necessarily undesirable. Because acceleration is characteristic of natural movements in sports and daily life, weight training exercises involved acceleration probably produce desirable neuromuscular training effects. Olympic lifters exercise such as the snatch and clean and jerk are effective in improving the ability to produce high accelerations against heavy resistance. Acceleration and deceleration are characteristic of virtually all natural movements. For example, sprinting requires the athlete's arms and legs to go through repeated cycles of acceleration and deceleration. Throwing a baseball, discus, shot, or javelin all involve sequences of body movements that accelerate the object to high release speeds. Because acceleration is a particular kind of movement pattern, training with accelerative movements can provide specificity of training. That's why explosive exercises such as power clean, high pull, are used in training for many different sports in which the leg and hip muscles provide force for accelerating the body. The bracketing technique, in which the athlete performs the sport movement with lighter than normal and heavier than normal implements, is another form of acceleration training. According to force-velocity relationship of muscle, a shot putter who trains with an extra heavy shot develops greater force during the accelerative movement than when the normal shot is used, because the inertia of the heavy implement forces the muscles to contract in a relatively low speed. When a relatively light shot is used, the lower inertia of the shot enables the putter to accelerate the shot more rapidly and to reach a higher speed of release, thereby training the neuromuscular system to operate with desired acceleration and speed ranges.